Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Marsha Enright. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Aaron.
Absolutely. Why don't you just start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
I consider myself an education entrepreneur. I got interested in the issues of education when I was a child, and I saw children around me being very unhappy in school. And I said to myself, well, I don't want that for my own children. I want them to keep that joy of learning. Because, when you look at a young child, I'm talking about, 1 year or 2 years, you can barely stop them from learning, right? Uh, but what happens by the time they're 8 or 9 and they don't wanna go to school? So, I had that in mind for a long time as I was growing up, and I came across some articles about the Montessori method, and when I was about 20, and I said, this sounds like what I want." So then I went and educated myself about it all, and, I put my oldest child into a Montessori, what's called normally called a preschool, but in Montessori terms, we call it a children's house because it's actually school. And, um, when it came to elementary school, there weren't the options that I wanted, so I and a couple of other parents started a Montessori elementary school, and I ran that for many years, about 27 years. But my own interest in teaching was always young adults, and I thought that they weren't being taught well in high school and in, college. The Montessori method is very developmentally oriented. She was the first to recognize that people need different kinds of learning depending on their age and their level of development, approximately their age, but it depends on each person. And so, I knew that what was going on for the needs of high school and college students wasn't optimal. So I put together a summer program called The Great Connections and first ran it in 2009. And I put everything I knew about what I had learned was the best ways for that age, 16-year-old to 24-year-old, to the kind of environment to learn in, to really help them not only learn information, but learn how to think really well, how to judge things for themselves, no matter what this topic was, what the subject matter, how to communicate with other people well, and be confident in themselves. And um, I had a surprising outcome. I mean, I was surprised by it that it by the end of the week, about 75% of the students would tell me that their life had been transformed because now they were able to judge things for themselves. And you could just see over the week this like rise of excitement and confidence and investment in learning that you don't see in school most of the time. But you do see in Montessori schools because the way that a Montessori school is structured, it's for the needs of the children. It's giving them what they need to learn in the right amounts at the right time, for the right periods, for each individual. And the children love to go to school in a well-run Montessori school. I mean, I had many parents who would write to me over the years that their child loved school so much that they would lie to the parents when they were sick so they wouldn't miss school. So, where do you get that? And you could see other indications of this because if a child was going through a very tough period with their family, whether it was a divorce or a death or problems with their parents, the school was kind of like their haven. The way that the other people treated them, their investment in the relationships. And so anyway, and I was getting this similar reaction in the summer program, and that's happened every year since we've been running it. So I knew that they were getting what they needed, and of course I'm always trying to question, are we doing things the best way? What does each individual need? So and now I'm working on our organization got a very large donation a few years ago, and we're working on making it into a full-time college program.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Before I get way off track and forget my question I always ask, let's go with what is your definition of inclusion if you had to define it?
Well, I normally think of it a different way. I think of each child needs to be treated as an individual and what they need, given their nature and their development. Montessori had this view that she was the first one to recognize so many things. She was just this brilliant scientist, and she was able to recognize by direct observation and kind of clinical experiments what now has been validated by all these double-blind experiments in developmental psychology. And so, for example, she recognized that children develop at different stages, and that individuals, she called it, that each person is so complex that you have the mystery of the child. You don't, they have each person has a path of development that unfolds during their growth, and what you want to do is present them with an environment that is structured, but it also has a lot of flexibility so that they can pursue their learning in their individual way and at their individual time. And any adult knows about this because if they're working, they know that, well, maybe some mornings, for example, yesterday morning, I don't know why, I woke up and I felt like I was run over by a truck. I was so tired, and I couldn't figure out the reason for it either. I was so tired, I could barely think, and so I decided, well, I had to do some exercise, I had to get some outside air, I had to work on something that was a little bit easier in order to get over this feeling in the morning. And then I was able to really invest myself in work that maybe it was harder to think about and more difficult to in the interactions. And, during the day, you know that, well, now you're really hungry now, so maybe you better eat something so that you have the mental energy to go on and do your work. So every adult knows about this. And it's similar with children. There's like a mystery of what's going on with each individual person. And what's best is if you have an educational environment that is crafted so that the child can follow their own path, that they're encouraged to do learning, so you want the environment to be so that they're not just doing anything, but, it's crafted so that it really gets them invested in learning, but that they can go at their own pace and, and in their own interests. And then the teacher's job is to find ways to make things that the child is not naturally interested in, interesting to them. So, that's how I think of it. I think of it as a matter of individualism, that you have to treat each person as an individual.
Yeah, I love that. So I think I've picked up bits and pieces of what Montessori is. Can you maybe explain, not just kind of, I mean, it seems like it's more, yeah, like you said, different, how figuring out the learning styles and giving, different kind of adjusting for each child. Can you maybe explain exactly what Montessori is since I haven't, I mean, I've heard of those schools, I just don't.
Sure,
I
sure,
I don't know a lot about them.
sure. So Montessori is an entirely different way to organize schooling than traditional schooling. It's like I said, it depends on what the stage of learning is for the child's development. The she created So so let me go back and how this all happened. She was the first woman doctor in Italy, and one of her first jobs was she worked at what was called an orthophonic clinic, where there were a lot of children who uh, were were intellectually challenged or they had autistic characteristics. And she noticed that they spent a lot of time playing with their food. And she realized that happened because it was such a sterile environment otherwise. They didn't have anything else to do, and so they needed that sensory stimulation. She realized that that was important to them. So she went and looked at, well, what had educational thinkers done in the 200 years before her. So this was like 1890, and she found that one in particular had developed a number of materials that are like games that teach concepts. So, for example, in the Montessori system, we used beads to represent the decimal system, and children as early as 3 years old can do arithmetic into the thousands using these. So you have single beads are units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 10 of them wired together is a 10 bar 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 10 of those put together is 100 square, 100, 200, 300, and 10 of those put together is a 1,000 cube. And there are many, many videos nowadays online about these materials, so your viewers can easily look this up. Look up Montessori materials, and you'll see all kinds of examples. And so what's beautiful about these materials with the beads is the units, the 10, 100, 1,000, is that not only are you able to do math without having to write numbers or know the numerals, but you're also seeing the relationship between the numbers and geometry, squaring, cubing. So you've got a real thing that you're learning about this from. Little children can take these and say you have 1,110, so one square, one cube, one square, one 10 bar, one unit. And then you can add that to what other number you have, like 2,345. And the child pushes these all together, and then they count, well, how many thousands do I have? How many hundreds do I have? And so they're learning how to do addition without having to be invested in actually writing numerals or anything like that. But they're learning the real thing. So a little 3 or 4-year-old can do mathematical operations into the thousands with this. Anyway, she developed literally hundreds of materials to work with. And with the first group, with the children from the orthopedic clinic, they ended up learning so well that by the end of the year, they passed the state exam for normal children. And this got her to instant fame practically, and everyone was raving how great this was. And of course it was good that they were learning all these things. But her thought was, well, what the heck are normal children learning if, these children that are having difficulty learning can learn this much? So then she was invited by a group of businessmen to open a school in a apartment building that was where families of factory workers were living. And these factory workers were from the country. They didn't know how to read or write. They were really pretty ignorant generally. And so the children were kind of, in a way, at a zero level of learning. And she introduced them to these materials and this method of each child can work on the material as long as they want, as long as they put it back to where it was. And the way the classroom is organized is all the materials, whether it's for mathematics, science, literature, language, history, geometry, is organized on the shelf in order of their subject matter and in order of difficulty. So the children know where they are, which thing they've done first, which thing they do second. And they also learn how to be very orderly, and respectful of each other. They can bring it to a table, they can bring it to a chair, the floor, they can sit at a desk, they can work with other people, but they don't have to. And they only are able to do the material once they've had a lesson. So the teacher kind of observes all the different children and sees, well, this one probably needs to learn this. This one maybe is ready to learn that. And throughout the day, her job is to bring them to small group lessons, 3 or 4 kids, and show them how to use the material. And then they're able to use it if they want to, and they can work on that right after the lesson, or maybe they don't feel like doing that and they want to go and do something in art or something like that. And the Montessori classroom has one teacher and one assistant. So while the teacher is giving lessons, the assistant is making sure that other children are working on something or helping them do that. So the whole classroom has got shelves, low shelves. Montessori was the one to invent child-sized furniture so that all the materials can be arranged around the room. It's arranged in a way so that the children can go to the shelves and get things and come to the space. When they come to school, they can do their work in whatever order they feel like, because when you're working, like I said before, sometimes I feel like doing one kind of thing right away in the morning and something else later, or vice versa. So likewise with the children. And the children, in the morning is the most concentrated work period, and then they usually have a little bit more of group activities in the afternoon. So it gives you a little idea about it. The principle in a Montessori classroom is freedom in a structured environment. So they have a lot of choice within the classroom, but it's limited. It's not, you can't just do anything you want with the materials. You can't just run around or anything like that. In fact, what the teacher tries to do is create the environment so that the children can't just run through the classroom. They have, the shelves are positioned so they have to kind of go around them, so that it's what's called self-disciplined. And what happens is the children want to work on these materials so much because they're just the right level of difficulty for them. And they're in like an order of difficulty. So each child gets into a flow state when they're working on the materials. And um, so the children learn, because they want to do this learning so much, they end up learning how to behave so that they can get what they want. They have to wait their turn, but once they have the material, they can work on it as long as they want and then put it back on the shelf. And they learn tremendous patience. They can talk to each other. Montessori said, we learn so much as adults by talking to each other. Why do we make children be silent? So there's a lot of different things like that in the Montessori classroom. Does that give you somewhat of an idea?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it sounds amazing, honestly. Like all the things that I think about in regular school that I didn't like or that I struggle with. I mean, it sounds like it fixes or at least addresses most of it. Because to me, it's like in the regular school system, you have like everybody's kind of well, everybody is taught the same thing basically. And if you don't have that interest, or if you're maybe gonna not go to college at the end of it, like you're still taking all the same classes, you're still learning the same stuff that you may not need. So I kind of like the approach of if they figure out what they're interested in and kind of go down that path and kind of see where it leads instead of forcing you into a certain box that may not work, and then you don't want to go to school, so your parents are fighting with you to go to school, and just all this
Exactly.
other stuff that goes with it.
Right, exactly. And as the child gets older, between 0 and 6 years old, she discovered that the children develop what she called organically. They they need a lot of sensory motor work. They do learn, like I said, they do mathematics. She discovered that there's two aspects of learning to write, which is knowing the shape of the letters and controlling your arm movements. So she developed two different materials to do that. We use sandpaper letters to get the feeling of the letters into their hands. But as they get older, the children need a little more guidance in terms of making sure that they learn the basic things that they really need to learn. For example, reading, writing, arithmetic. So that the teachers will be noticing that. And then, as I said, they'll try to find ways to engage the child using their own interests. If they're really not interested in arithmetic, but they love dinosaurs, maybe they'll take the children out to the parking lot and say, well, how big is an apatosaurus versus Tyrannosaurus rex? And they'll take chalk and they'll measure that, and that is a way of getting a child more interested in a subject matter that maybe they're not naturally interested in.
Yeah, for sure. What are the biggest myths about learning and how do they hold people back?
What are the biggest myths? Oh, one myth is that learning um, is sequential, and that it's on a steady line. In other words, okay, you're going to learn this and then you're going to learn that, and it's just a steady line that just builds up. Well, it turns out that a lot of learning is in jumps and starts. And that's the way the human mind works, that you tend to need to kind of learn a whole bunch of things about something, and then all of a sudden you understand it. And it's not a matter of, okay, I'm going to learn this and then the next step and the next step. I mean, you do end up learning those steps, but it's much more in jumps and starts than it is a simple line. And I think the more people, the teachers understand that, the more um, they can help the children by thinking, okay, what maybe are they not getting here that's not enabling them to integrate and understand that concept. So that's a major myth. And the other one is the idea that that the teacher needs to be the the information spigot. In other words, you're going to get your information from the teacher, and the teacher should be up there and telling you, all the kinds of things you need to know. When sometimes the teacher can be giving like a demonstration or a short lecture about things. People don't realize that most people only have an amount of 20 minutes of attention span to listen to a lecture. And after that, you get a lot of wandering. Because you see, the problem with a lecture is that if you're not following what the person is saying, you get lost. And then you don't have the ability to ask that person a question in order to get back on track of understanding their kind of explanation or their argument about the material that they're trying to get across. So that's a problem. And that's one of the advantages of um, having people, especially the best lecturers, having these lectures online. You can kind of stop and think, okay, what didn't understand, and go back and re-listen to what they had to say. And that really helps a lot. But in the classroom, it's not so helpful. So as much as possible, if the teachers can do what's called formative assessment. In other words, try to understand as they're going along what the child is understanding and what they're not, the better the learning is. Instead of doing these kinds of learning where the child learns a whole bunch of things and then you give them a test at the end. That's called summative assessment. You're not finding out where the child is getting confused. So that's one of the myths.
It makes sense. I mean, just yeah. I mean, I haven't been in school for a while, but yeah, just sitting there and listening. And I mean, I honestly, if I look back at my school stuff, I mean, I kind of learned the game of I need to know this stuff until I take a test and then I forget it. Like it was just I was good enough at figuring out like the game of what to know and pass a test, and get that out of my brain, fill it up with other stuff to pass it, and I could get the grades I needed to not study and get through no problem. So I mean, I would space out, I would doodle, I mean, so it's interesting as you're talking how I'm thinking about my experience. And the other thing that comes to mind is like I go to Bible study with my dad and a couple of his friends, and um, that like the small group talking about that subject is way more learn a lot more in that setting than sitting like in church for 30 minutes, have somebody up front just speaking to you and they say something, you can't ask a question. So it's similar in that setting, I think, where it's just you have somebody just talking to you, but like you can't, they say something like that doesn't make any sense. You can't ask a follow up question. So then you're just sitting there listening and you kind of forget about that, or you just kind of tune out because like
Right.
that part of it. So yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, and actually, in our summer programs for the 16 to 24-year-olds, see, Montessori recognized that the last period of development was 16 to 24. And what's interesting is, in recent years, neurology has discovered that the brain grows until you're 24. So it's she recognized by direct observation this kind of thing. So anyway, in the summer program, our main classroom method is called a Socratic seminar. And this is where we use a specialized version of it too. This is where the teacher is the guide to the material, and the students are required to ask questions about whatever they're reading, and then try to figure out with reason and evidence from the material what the answer is. And you get a really interesting discussion. You have to listen very carefully to the other person. You have to respond to what the other person is saying instead of just sitting there thinking about what you want to say next. You have to pay attention to that other person and then incorporate whatever you want to say in the response, making sure that you show that you understand what that other person said. And what happens is that you know how different people can come to, say, a reading different ways and have different interpretations, and then they have to use evidence from the text and reasoning about it to validate why their interpretation is correct. And so you end up learning lots of different ways to come at material that maybe that you didn't think of. And I kind of say the students end up learning to develop like a Swiss Army knife of thinking about what they're approaching. So, and they also, with this methodology of listening to each other, they learn how to communicate really well. And what I found with the people who've come to the program and now they're in their 30s, I'll talk to them and they'll say, "Oh, I still use these methods in my work." Because if you're in a team and you're trying to figure out a problem, people are thinking about it different ways. You have to get clarity about what are you talking about. Do you really understand what each other is saying, and do you understand what the problem is? So my students end up becoming really good facilitators in this situation for their work.
That sounds amazing. I was just thinking, just in the society we're in right now, like something like that, where you have to like talk nice or talk respectfully to each other and, come up with reasons for why you think the way you do and talk to each other would be a good tool for all of us to have at this point.
I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I noticed a change in the last couple of years because I always interview the students before I accept them to the program. And so many of them the last couple of years said, "Well, I just want to go someplace where I can talk to people about ideas." They said, "My friends won't talk to me." And I think too many of the kids are afraid they'll get canceled, they'll say the wrong thing, they'll be attacked, whatever. And so it's just made them shut up about discussing the very issues. I mean, not just abstract ideas, but, how should you live? How should you treat your friends? What am I going to do with myself in life? Um, what's the right way what should we do about international policies? I mean, there's so many things that young kids are really interested in, and they've got all this pressure on them so that they're afraid to um, voice their thoughts. And so I think it's a terrible situation for their personal development.
I mean, as you're saying that, I'm just thinking to myself personally, like I took all social media off my phone so I couldn't go down the rabbit hole for one, but I mean, it's not, I would see something you'd want to comment, but I'm like, there's no, I mean, if you do something on Facebook, people just say whatever they're thinking and it's not really healthy. So, I mean, even for me, trying to think of safe places where I can freely talk about what I believe or have a respectful conversation. I mean, there's at home with my partner or, going to like the Bible study with my dad and his friends are about two places I feel like completely comfortable talking about things. Otherwise, it's you kind of like are trying to figure out what can I share that's safe or what's not, you know what I mean? So there isn't even for me not a lot of safe spaces I feel to share stuff.
Yeah. Because the trouble is, if somebody brings up anything that's political or social, it's too easy to get into an argument about it and not have a reasoned discussion. There's way too many hot emotions that seem to be happening these days. So,
How can young adults become the entrepreneurs of their own lives and why is this skill so crucial in today's world?
well, it's crucial in today's world because we have such a tumultuous economy. We have so many changes happening all the time. I mean, it's been happening for basically since the Industrial Revolution got started, but more and more lately, and it seems in some respects faster. I mean, I haven't actually measured whether it's faster or not. I read if we've measured that, but it can feel like that, right? Making yourself able to be very flexible and versatile in your thinking and able to come up with solutions to problems, to know enough about what's out there in the world that you can seize opportunities. These are all characteristics of the entrepreneur. And so they're important in today's economy because of all the changes and well, especially because people are worried now about AI is going to take over all kinds of jobs. So what can humans do that AI can't do. Well, humans are the ones that we have judgment, we can have wisdom, we have creativity and conscientiousness, be able to work well. So if you want to develop all those characteristics in your skill set, in order to make yourself able to make the best judgments for yourself and create your own opportunities. So that's what I consider uh, developing them so they can become the entrepreneurs of their own lives. I hope I've described it well enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense to me because I mean, I'm old enough when I was younger, it's like we're supposed to go to college, and me and my dad worked in the family business from early 70s, retired a couple years ago. I mean, he never had another job. He just was always in that. And, but I mean, it's- I feel like it's kind of started with my generation where you kind of had that in your mind, you were going to get a job and be there forever. But then somewhere it changed to where now you're not going normally people don't stay 50
Yeah,
years in one job anymore. So we kind of, it's definitely shifting. But yeah, I mean, now it's way different, but yeah. Like I said, when I was young, like, you get a job and then maybe you stick it out. Now it's like even me, it's like I don't really see a job as forever at this point. It's just for right now, this is the where I should be. And then if something else comes up or life changes, then you figure it out. But yeah, you definitely need to be more flexible and figure out those other things and realize, I mean, younger people now probably realize you don't have to stay miserable in a job for 50 years if you don't want to. There's plenty of things to do that you can go somewhere else. So
and capable of learning new ways of
yes.
doing things so that you can switch from one job to another.
Right.
That's
That's
really
true.
important is having that skill.
That is true too. Yeah, for sure. What is one tip that you can share today to help the listeners be more inclusive? So just something everybody can start doing today to be more inclusive.
Well, I go back to my comments about individualism, that really pay attention to each individual and try to understand where that person is at so that you can interact with them well and be a positive force in their life and get the best out of them because of it.
Yeah, I love that. Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
Uh, we have a website called Reliance College, so reliancecollege.org. We have all kinds of different programs on there. We're doing things. We're doing the summer program, the end of July. Sometimes we do weekend programs. I have a new hybrid program called AI Proof You, which is one weekend in person and then 6 weeks online and then another weekend in person. And the reason I do that is people don't realize that the learning is so much better in person. I mean, certainly the research has shown that. And when you get to know somebody else in person, then you can have a more productive relationship online. So we have that program going on, and uh, we're also doing a trip to Spain this summer, the last 2 weeks of June, which is kind of a study vacation where it's called Spain's Contributions to Freedom. And we read different texts of different authors. We go to where they lived and worked. We do the usual tourist things, go to the beach, out to dinner, and things like that. So that's all at our website, reliancecollege.org. And I welcome people to contact us. There's a contact form on there that you can get in contact with us if you want. And I also have a writing website, Marsha-Familaro-Enright.com, which I'm happy to put in the show notes, where I have a lot of writing about education and development on there. So,
Awesome. I'll make sure I put those in. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, I went my bachelor's, I was in person. Well, I mean, that was a while ago. They didn't even have online. And then my master's, I did online, which the advantage of that was I could do it from home and not have to travel to a different state to do it. But like, I mean, I missed like you said, you show up before 5 minutes, 10 minutes before class, you sit down, you BS with people, you get to know them. You go out to have coffee after class. That stuff it's not
All
there.
there.
And yet it does make a big difference. Like it makes it's a whole different experience.
Yes. And this is especially important for the younger learners. I mean, online learning is very advantageous if you know exactly what you want to learn, you have a
Hmm.
certain skill set you want to develop, and then it's very convenient. Um, it's also you really have to be motivated to individually motivated to do well in online learning because you don't have the experience of working with somebody else, which adds to the fun of it, so
For sure. Ready for the last question?
sure.
Do you like Spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
I haven't had in a long time, so I can't tell you.
Or would you eat it if you had it in the cupboard? Okay. So I live in southern Minnesota where they make Spam and where the Spam Museum's located. So I've been asking them. I've been asking all my guests to see if what the reaction is. Usually it's kind of funny to see what they say.
Yeah. What town did you say it's in?
It's in Austin, Minnesota, so it's way in the southern part.
Well, if I'm ever up there, I'll have to stop and see that.
There you go.
Notice
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. We've been there a couple of times. It's got a lot of history stuff, a lot of about the different products they have for different countries, but it's pretty fun. It brings about 100,000 people into a town of 25,000 people a year, so
Wow, wow.
it's pretty.
I know there have been more, advertisements for Spam lately than I'd seen in a long
Yeah,
time.
that's true. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah. Now you say that, we've noticed some too, so it's been
yeah.
kind of interesting.
It's the Hormel company, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
is Hormel. That's where Hormel started. It was Austin, Minnesota. So yeah, that's where they have the museum. And when it
Interesting.
opened, Humberto came in because it was around the time he wrote that book, The Greatest Generation. So he came in for like the grand opening back when it opened a long time ago. So yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I really appreciate your having me.
To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.